In recent weeks, one of the strangest and most alarming stories in the modern technology industry has emerged around Anthropic's Claude artificial intelligence system. At first glance, it looked like a regular model update, another step in the race between OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, XAI, and other technology giants. But it quickly became clear that this was no longer just about a new chatbot that writes better texts, programs faster, or analyzes documents more accurately. It was about a system that, according to assessments from US officials and cybersecurity specialists, is approaching a level of autonomy where artificial intelligence may no longer simply respond to humans, but independently build chains of actions, search for weaknesses in digital infrastructure, test vulnerabilities, write code, plan complex operations, and act as a fully capable digital agent. This is precisely why the story surrounding the new Claude became not just another product release, but a political event. According to Reuters, The Guardian, Financial Times, and other major publications, the Donald Trump administration temporarily restricted access to Anthropic's most advanced models, including Fable 5 and Mythos 5, citing national security concerns. Officially, this was presented as a security review and export control measure, but in reality, it sent a signal to the entire industry. The era when artificial intelligence laboratories could release whatever they wanted is coming to an end. Washington now wants to understand in advance which models are entering the market, who has access to them, what capabilities they possess, whether they can be used for cyber attacks, whether their safeguards can be bypassed, and whether they are becoming tools that may one day operate faster than governments can respond. The most important aspect here is that the alarm was raised not only by AI critics, independent researchers, or people who have spent years warning about the risks of uncontrolled artificial intelligence. The alarm was raised by Anthropic itself. This makes the situation especially serious, because Anthropic has always positioned itself as the most cautious AI laboratory in the industry. The company was founded by people who left OpenAI specifically because of concerns that the race for greater capability could move faster than safety measures. If even a company like this is forced to admit that it is impossible to completely protect a model from being bypassed, that future systems require government oversight, and that dangerous releases must be controllable through regulation, then this is no longer science fiction, but a new phase of technological reality. Washington understands this. The White House increasingly views AI not as an ordinary product, but as a strategic technology on the level of nuclear energy, satellite intelligence, or cyber weapons. A directive from the Trump administration explicitly states that advanced artificial intelligence capabilities strengthen the country while simultaneously creating new national security challenges. This is the key point. The United States does not want to stop AI development. On the contrary, Trump is betting on American leadership, on winning the technology race, and on ensuring that the most powerful models remain in the hands of American companies. But at the same time, the White House is becoming increasingly concerned that an overly powerful model could become a weapon if it falls into the hands of hostile governments, hacker groups, or even ordinary users who learn how to bypass restrictions. The situation surrounding Claude, Fable, and Mythos became the first major example of this new policy. According to Reuters, the restrictions were introduced after concerns that the models could be used for cyber attacks and software vulnerability discovery. One of the most worrying developments was the reports that Fable's safety mechanisms could potentially be bypassed, causing the model to generate dangerous code or assist in identifying weaknesses in systems. After that, Anthropic had to strengthen its filters, introduce new dangerous behavior classifiers, create stricter monitoring systems, and cooperate more closely with the US government. Only after that did access begin to be restored, but no longer in the old format. Instead, under much stricter oversight. This is where the most interesting part begins. Because in the traditional technology model, a company releases a product, users test it, and the market decides who wins. But in the case of Claude, the situation became different. The government essentially stated that some models can no longer be treated as ordinary software. They cannot simply be uploaded to the cloud and open to the entire world. They need to be reviewed before release. It is necessary to understand who receives access. There must be a shutdown mechanism, Attempts at misuse must be recorded, and information must be shared with government institutions. This is no longer just a market. It is almost a system of authorization for access to a strategic technology. According to insiders cited by Western media, the strongest concern was not the fact that Claude became smarter, but that new models are becoming agentic. In other words, they no longer simply wait for a question from a person. They can receive a task, break it down into stages, choose tools, write and execute code, check results, fix errors, and continue working. Today, this looks like a convenient assistant for a programmer, analyst, or researcher. But from the government's perspective, it also looks like a potential digital operator capable of scaling the actions of one person to the level of an entire team. A single attacker with a very powerful AI could do what previously required a group of specialists. This is why the term dual-use technology is increasingly appearing in discussions within the US government. Claude can help doctors, engineers, scientists, lawyers, and developers. But the same ability to analyze, plan, and write code can also be used for hacking, automated vulnerability discovery, creating phishing campaigns, bypassing security systems, analyzing infrastructure, and accelerating malicious operations. This does not mean that Claude itself is malicious or that it has already become uncontrollable, but it does mean that the line between a useful tool and a dangerous amplifier is becoming increasingly thin. Inside the Pentagon and the US intelligence community, according to Western media reports, such models are being watched especially closely, because cyberspace has long become a full-scale domain of conflict. If in the past the main threats were missiles, ships, aircraft, and satellites, today one of the biggest concerns is autonomous digital systems. Imagine a model that can read technical documentation, analyze millions of lines of code, find weaknesses, write exploits, test them in simulations, and do all of this faster than a human. Even if such a model is restricted by rules, the question is whether those rules can be bypassed. If they can be bypassed, how much time will hackers need to turn it into an attack tool? Anthropic says it is strengthening its defenses. The company points to new monitoring systems, red teaming, specialized classifiers, and cooperation with government institutions. But even Anthropic acknowledges that absolute protection against jailbreaks does not exist. And this may be the most concerning part of the entire story, because if a model is powerful enough and protection is never perfect, then the question is no longer whether risk can be completely eliminated. The question is how quickly companies and governments can detect misuse, stop it, and prevent it from scaling. Donald Trump is approaching this issue in his usual style, firmly, publicly, and with a strong focus on national security. His administration is not saying that AI development should be frozen. On the contrary, the White House emphasizes that America must remain the leader. But at the same time, a new logic is emerging. The most powerful models should not be available to everyone, immediately and everywhere. First, testing. First, cooperation with the government. First, guarantees that the model will not become a tool for America's adversaries. And only then, broad release. This is creating tension in Silicon Valley. Some believe that the government has finally recognized the scale of the threat. Others fear that the White House could gain too much power over technology companies and begin deciding which models are released, which are delayed, who gets access, and who does not. Some critics are already saying that this creates a dangerous precedent. Today, restrictions are introduced in the name of security, but tomorrow the government could use such mechanisms for political pressure, market control, or limiting competitors. But supporters of a stricter approach respond. If a model can potentially assist in a cyber attack against an energy grid, a bank, a military base, or a government network, then this is no longer a matter of a free market. It is a matter of national security. The position of Dario Amodei, the head of Anthropic, is especially interesting. He has long warned that humanity is entering a phase where AI may become not just an economic factor, but a civilizational challenge. Amodei has said that governments should have the right to block or stop dangerous releases if a model becomes too powerful and difficult to control. This is a rare position for the head of a technology company. Usually, CEOs demand less regulation, more freedom, and less interference. But Anthropic is effectively saying the opposite. If we create systems that can be dangerous, then the government must have a mechanism to intervene. And this is exactly why the Claude story is so important. Because for the first time, we are seeing warnings from the company itself turning into actual policy. Previously, discussions about AI regulation often seemed abstract. Someday in the future, if artificial superintelligence appears, if models become dangerous. But now it is happening in practice. The model is released, the government stops access, the company strengthens security, officials conduct reviews, access is restored, but under conditions. This is not theory, this is the new operating model of the entire industry. Against this background, concerns are growing in the United States that the next leap of Claude could become even more significant. If Fable 5 and Mythos 5 already triggered government intervention, what will happen with future versions? What will happen with the next generation of Claude Opus? What happens if the model can not only write code, but independently manage entire projects? What happens if it can analyze confidential data, connect to corporate systems, manage agents, coordinate actions, and make intermediate decisions without human involvement? Even if all of this is developed for business, medicine, science, and defense, the risks will grow alongside the capabilities. The main fear here is not that Claude will wake up tomorrow and decide to take over the world. That is a simplistic movie scenario. The real concern is much more subtle. It is that powerful AI could begin pursuing goals too efficiently, too autonomously, and in ways that are too unpredictable. If a human sets a task incorrectly, the model may find an unwanted path. If a malicious actor formulates a request cleverly enough, the model may help them bypass restrictions. If a system gains access to tools, files, code, and networks, a mistake could have real-world consequences. And the more of these agents operate simultaneously, the harder it becomes to control the overall picture. This is why experts talk not about the risk of one AI uprising, but about the risk of losing control. These are different things. A loss of control may not look like a robot attacking people, but rather like thousands of autonomous processes acting too quickly. One agent misinterpreted a task. Another received excessive access privileges. A third discovered a vulnerability it was not supposed to search for. A fourth created code that humans did not have time to review. A fifth began interacting with external systems. And all of this happens at the scale of corporations, banks, government institutions, and military infrastructure. The US government understands this especially clearly because America already exists in a state of constant cyber confrontation with China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and independent hacker groups. Any model that accelerates cyber operations becomes part of this larger competition. Even if Anthropic does not want military applications, even if the company builds protective measures, the very existence of such technology changes the balance. Because if one country restricts access, another may try to steal the model, copy the architecture, create an alternative, or use an open model without such limitations. And this is where the geopolitical layer begins. For the United States, Claude is not just a commercial product. It is part of technological superiority, just like microchips, satellites, operating systems, and cloud platforms once were. If American models become the most powerful, the US will gain a huge advantage in the economy, science, defense, and intelligence. But if these models reach adversaries, that advantage could turn into a threat. That is why the Trump administration is trying to create a balance, not to suffocate the industry, but also not to allow it to release systems without oversight. Some sources in the technology industry say this could become the beginning of a new system of trusted customers. In other words, the most powerful AI versions would initially be available not to all users, but only to verified companies, government organizations, and allies. Ordinary users would receive safer versions, dangerous capabilities would be limited, requests related to cyber risks, biology, weapons, or bypassing security systems would be redirected to safer models or blocked. In theory, this sounds reasonable, but in practice, a question arises. Who decides who is trusted? The White House? Anthropic? The Department of Commerce? Intelligence agencies? And what happens if access to AI becomes a political tool? Against this background, a tense atmosphere is growing around Claude. Some see it as a breakthrough that could accelerate science, medicine, programming, and business. Others see it as the first signal that the most powerful AI systems are already beginning to move beyond ordinary control. Others argue that the panic is exaggerated and that the real danger is not AI becoming uncontrollable, but governments using fear of AI to increase their own control. And all three positions have their own arguments. But the main thing that can no longer be denied is this: Claude has become part of the US government agenda. It is no longer just an Anthropic product. It is an object of attention for the White House, the Department of Commerce, the Pentagon, intelligence agencies, major cloud platforms, and US allies. When a model causes temporary access restrictions at the government level, it means its capabilities are being taken seriously, not as a toy, not as a chatbot, not as another subscription service, but as a technology capable of affecting national security. Special attention is being paid to the Mythos model. According to Western publications, it is connected with cybersecurity tasks and may be used for threat detection. On paper, this is an entirely beneficial capability. Such a model can help find vulnerabilities before hackers exploit them. It can strengthen the defense of companies, banks, infrastructure, and government networks. But the problem is that a tool capable of finding vulnerabilities for protection can potentially also be used for attacks. This is a classic cybersecurity dilemma. The same capability can work in both directions. That is why the US government, according to media reports, allowed access to Mythos only for a limited number of verified organizations. This is very revealing. Washington is not saying, "This model is useless, shut it down." Washington is saying, "This model is too useful and too dangerous to be given to just anyone." And this is a fundamentally new logic. The more powerful AI becomes, the less it resembles a mass market product, and the more it resembles an infrastructure asset with controlled access. In the case of Fable, concerns were related to the fact that users could bypass restrictions and receive assistance in potentially dangerous scenarios. Anthropic stated that it was strengthening its security systems, including classifiers designed to block most dangerous behavior. But even if protection works 99% of the time, the question remains about the remaining 1%. In an ordinary application, a 1% error rate is inconvenient. In a model that can assist with cyber attacks, 1% can be critical, because attackers do not use the system randomly. They deliberately search for weaknesses, repeat attempts, combine prompts, use alternative wording, and test the limits. This is the core of the jailbreak problem. A model may have rules, but a person tries to make it violate those rules. The more complex the model, the more ways there are to bypass restrictions. The more powerful the model, the higher the cost of a successful bypass. And when Anthropic admits that it is impossible to completely eliminate jailbreaks, it sounds like a cold wake-up call for the entire industry, because then security becomes not a final state, but a constant race. Developers build protection, attackers search for ways around it. Developers close those gaps, attackers find new ones. And all of this is happening while the models themselves are becoming smarter. Industry insiders increasingly say that the next stage of the AI race will be determined not only by model size and response quality, but by the level of autonomy. The winner will not be the one who simply creates the smartest chatbot. The winner will be the one who creates an AI that can perform work, completely, from beginning to end, with minimal human involvement. This is exactly why Claude attracts so much attention. Anthropic is betting on reliability, long context, work with documents, code, agent-based tasks, and corporate processes. This is a very powerful combination. But the more Claude transforms from a conversational partner into an executor, the stronger the question becomes, who controls the executor? For businesses, this is a dream. A company can give AI access to documents, CRM systems, code, email, analytics, internal databases, and ask it to complete a task. For governments, it is both a dream and a nightmare, because the same principle can work in defense, intelligence, cybersecurity, and infrastructure management. And if an error, misuse, or bypass appears somewhere, the consequences may go beyond the screen. This is exactly the context in which Trump's statements and the actions of the White House become easier to understand. The administration wants early access to new models for evaluation. It wants to understand exactly what companies are releasing. It wants to create security standards that will apply before public release. This is not just bureaucracy. It is an attempt to avoid a situation where a model has already become globally available, has already been integrated into thousands of services, and only afterward it is discovered that it can be used for dangerous purposes. At the same time, there is a serious political debate in the United States. Republicans around Trump talk about national security, American leadership, and protection from China. Democrats and some technology experts fear arbitrary intervention, where the administration could decide the fate of companies without transparent laws and procedures. Businesses worry that overly strict control will slow innovation and give advantages to competitors. Security specialists respond that without control, a catastrophe could occur. This is no longer a debate about an application. It is a debate about how to manage a technology that could potentially reshape the economy, security, and power. The concerns inside the US government, judging by recent actions, are indeed serious. This is not panic caused by officials who do not understand what is happening. Quite the opposite. They are beginning to understand enough to become concerned. They see that models are becoming stronger. They see that protection is not absolute. They see that China is developing its own systems. They see that cyber threats can scale rapidly. They see that AI can dramatically accelerate scientific, military, and intelligence processes. And they see that the legal framework is not keeping up with the technology. Therefore, the new Claude has become a symbol of a broader problem. Today, it is Anthropic. Tomorrow, it is OpenAI. The day after tomorrow, it is Google, XAI, Meta, or Chinese AI laboratories. Every new model will be subject not only to technical evaluation, but also to political evaluation. But there is something else. There is an acknowledgement that models are becoming powerful enough for governments to intervene before release. There is an acknowledgement that jailbreaks cannot be fully eliminated. There is an acknowledgement that cyber risks are increasing. There is an acknowledgement that future models may require a legal framework for blocking deployments. There is a new reality in which AI is no longer developed quietly inside laboratories. Now, every major Claude update is being watched not only by users, developers, and investors. It is being watched by the White House, the Pentagon, the Department of Commerce, intelligence agencies, US allies, competitors in China, hacker groups, and the entire technology industry. Because the next Claude may not just be a better assistant, it may become a stress test for the entire AI control system. If this test is failed, the consequences could be far more serious than a failed product release. It could become the moment when humanity realizes that it has created an intelligence that has not yet gone out of control, but is already powerful enough that controlling it has become the central question of the 21st century.